I want to start with the uphill battle, some would say, you faced at the helm of the SEC in terms of you have this very ambitious agenda, one of the most ambitious we've seen at the SEC in years, but it's faced a lot of legal troubles, pushback from Wall Street, corporate America. A stat here, as I have, is your rules are facing a record number of court challenges. So given that backdrop and the legal hurdles you faced, how would you grade this SEC? Is it an A for effort, or would you say it's a bit more?
Look, Annmarie, I'm proud to be in this role. It's a privilege every day to fight on behalf of Americans, investors, and issuers. And it's really that. It's like William O. Douglas, our third chair, and he went on to be on the Supreme Court, said we're the investor's advocate. But we also look out for people raising money, the issuers. The folks in the middle, some of whom are in this room, the broker-dealers, the stock exchanges, the investment advisors, and so forth, ultimately, the investors and issuers are their customers, and we are trying to update the rules for the 2020s. Now, we put out an agenda of about 50, 55 items to do. By the way, my predecessor, Jay Clayton, did 64. But we have already finalized and implemented really consequential rules, like in the last couple of weeks, implemented shortening the settlement cycle in half to 1 day from 2 days. That means if an investor sells their stock on a Monday, they get their cash Tuesday. They don't have to wait till Wednesday. But we also did a lot around corporate governance, how insiders sell their stock in the market, and some important rules there to restrict the use of non-public information, or even settling down some challenges that we had with China, and China being in our markets. And in the cyber world, that public companies have to report material cyber events, but also we just finalized a rule that all of us in this room, if our information at a broker-dealer or investment advisor gets hacked, they have to give us a notice on that. I mean, these are things that are consequential that we've been able to been successful. So I think it's a great agency, and we continue basically fighting on behalf of the American investor and American issuer.
So the most recent rebuke, though, came from the Fifth Court, which I think you know about, of course, your attempt to regulate private equity funds and also protect private investors like pension funds. This is what the panel had to say from the court. Quote, it exceeded the statutory authority by adopting the rule. So now what's your next move? What's your response to this?
Well, one is we do everything within the law and how courts interpret the law. We're still assessing and looking at that ruling out of the Fifth Circuit down in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi. And so we're still assessing that as a commission. But at its core, what we were really saying there was investors in private funds, which has grown to $30 trillion in assets under management. Investors in those funds, the limited partners, would get quarterly disclosures about their fees, performance, and arrangements with others, so-called side letters. And it was under authority that was put into law under Dodd-Frank. The court had a different view of that new authority, but we're still assessing what to do. But we do everything, again, Annmarie, within what the law is and how courts interpret it. And if need be, we pivot.
What are the risks to the financial system, say, that this doesn't happen and you're blocked for good?
At the core, what we were seeking to achieve as a commission was greater transparency to investors, not to the public, but to the investors in these funds. And who's behind those investors, those endowment funds, those pension funds? They're the teachers, they're the firefighters in every single state in the U.S. They're the universities' endowments that are investing in these funds. And so it was really about greater transparency, instilling greater competition in an important part of the capital markets.
This came from the Fifth Circuit. You mentioned Texas. A lot of these rebukes that are coming to the SEC are going through...
And to other agencies.
Right.
Across the administrative state, you're seeing more filings and in a couple of maybe leading in certain circuits.
Yeah, so what's your response to that? That a lot of this is happening through Texas, Louisiana. Does it feel political to you?
Well, we respond in whatever court we're in, and I deeply believe in our democracy. Parties have a right to go into court. We're a law enforcement agency. We bring 700 or 800 law enforcement actions a year. Many of them settled, but some of them that go into court. And we really respect the courts and follow what they say.
We also have frozen right now the emissions disclosures, because that's also facing a ton of lawsuits. So the SEC decided to freeze them. What happens if they become unfrozen? How quickly do companies need to disclose these kind of emissions?
So just a little background. We're a disclosure agency. We're a securities agency, and what President Roosevelt pulled together with Congress 90 years ago, we just had our 90th birthday. It was kind of cool. And what they pulled together is that investors get to decide on what investments they want, and that we, the SEC, are merit neutral. Further, we are not a climate regulator. We are not an environmental regulator. We're not an ESG regulator. We're a securities regulator. But what we found when I came into office, many investors are investing in companies based on their climate risk disclosures. And of the top 1,000 market cap companies, the so-called Russell 1000, 90% already are making disclosures around climate risk, and nearly 60% are already making some disclosures around greenhouse gas emissions. That what you asked. Therein, I think we had a role, and what we finalized the rule to say, if material, it's only if material, investors would need to make those disclosures to their investors, because the investors are already making decisions on it. But you're right, it's front of a court. I'm not going to get ahead of our really terrific lawyers who will have a chance to lay out that in front of a court.
I guess the question I have is, will there be a timeline that companies will know that they need to start disclosing this? How quickly can you move with the rules once it's out of the courts?
Annmarie, it's a good question. Of course, relates to what a court tells us. We laid out a set of it's called implementation timeline over a course of several years, depending upon what the court says. We did stay the rule, so that means it's stayed. But once we hear from the courts, I think you've got a good question.
So another place that you've been trying to tighten the rules.
Sorry if we didn't make news there.
Yeah, so it's okay. Maybe here we can. I know a lot of people are interested in this. There's a lot of messages when you tweeted that you were going to be doing this conference, a lot of messages from the crypto community. This is a place that you've tried to also tighten the rules.
$120 trillion capital markets, and lo and behold, I made it 6 minutes and 15 seconds, and now you bring up crypto.
Well, there's some other, other legal challenges.
I know it gets views, it gets clicks for Bloomberg.
Well, people are interested in this, and actually it's becoming a political issue. So, but I first want to talk about how do you reconcile broadly going after some of the issues in the industry, but at the same time as approving things like the Bitcoin ETF and potentially the Ethereum ETF.
So in terms of these exchange-traded products, any investor can express themselves and purchase Bitcoin, for instance. And when I came to the agency in 21, actually there were some filings around mutual funds, and they ultimately led to Bitcoin futures exchange-traded funds. Those have been around for 3 years. The courts ruled around something called spot exchange-traded products. I know it's kind of technical, but ruled that we should be consistent. We pivoted. We approved those in January. I would say this, what the investing public has now is an exchange-traded product on regulated stock exchanges. Now, let me compare that to how people generally buy crypto. They're buying it or selling it often on non-compliant platforms. Why do I say non-compliant? These platforms also include significant number of tokens, and without prejudging any one of them, many of them are securities because it's the law of the land. We follow the Supreme Court's law of the land regarding this. There's 15 to 20,000 various tokens, and they're offered in investment contracts, schemes that are investment contracts. And you look at it, the American public is not getting the proper disclosure that they are required to get by law, but they need. We're merit neutral, but you all, if you're investing, if you're listening to the public, you're not getting the disclosure that you're supposed to get. And the intermediaries in the middle of the market, those so-called exchanges or broker-dealers and so forth, if they've got hundreds of offerings on that platform, think about it. How many of those offerings don't have some group of entrepreneurs in the middle? It just sort of belies logic. The result, this is a field that the leading lights from a couple years ago are either in jail, about to go to jail, or waiting extradition. Think about it. This is that field. That's the field right now where the public has really been harmed. And there's significant non-compliance in the field. And so, yes, we're bringing that in front of courts, and those will play out because folks that are not complying with the law hurt the American public.
But still, you're approving ETFs, and the one I think there's a lot of excitement around is this Ethereum ETF because we could potentially see it very soon. Will we see it? There
are actually, just so I can help you out, there, as of last year, was already an Ethereum exchange-traded fund based on Ethereum futures. Ethereum futures have been trading on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange for 3 or 4 years. We actually went live last year, an Ethereum futures ETF. But yes, we had filings around cash Ethereum exchange-traded products. Again, I apologize to be that technical, but these already exist in some form, but we approved those filings. What is in front of us, and it's done at a staff level, is what's called the registration statements, the disclosure statements. And again, these disclosures are really important. They're important to investors making investment decisions.
Will we see that in the next few weeks?
I don't know the timing, but it's going smoothly. You can almost follow it publicly. You see these filings. Bloomberg then reports on them. You get more clicks.
Do you think we'll see it before the election?
I'm not trying to determine what the staff is doing, but it's going smoothly, and I just envision it will at a staff level and smoothly play out. And it's really about the asset managers making the full disclosure so that those registration statements can go effective, and those lawyers know what that is. It's something our Division of Corporation Finance handles hundreds or if not thousands of times over anybody's career. It's smoothly functioning. It's really up to the asset managers to make the proper disclosures.
Back to some of the crypto companies, though. A lot of them have moved abroad to places like London and Singapore. So in that sense, do you think that investors are actually safe? Because they're still innovating, and they're still out there in the marketplace. They're just not in the United States.
To the extent that they're operating within the basic protections of providing the full disclosure, what Roosevelt called complete disclosure, he called the first Securities Act the Truth in Securities Act. If they're really telling the truth about it and they're making the disclosures and properly registered, and then if the intermediaries are operating within the law without the conflicts, and look, so much of this field is highly centralized. It's not decentralized. That's not what's happening here. It's highly centralized around a few platforms that are also centralizing and commingling things that we would never allow anywhere else. And we don't. The law doesn't allow you to be trading against your customers and operating a so-called exchange and trading in front and possibly also taking investments in a investment contract or security and then listing and getting the listing pop. I mean, these are all happening potentially at these. And again, we see some of the leading, 2 years ago that would have filled a room much bigger than this if they were sitting on this stage, are now sitting in jail or awaiting jail.
Part of the reason why...
I say this and you giggle, but this is a serious thing. These are a lot of folks that are not living within our securities laws, but they're not necessarily living within our Bank Secrecy Act around anti-money laundering. And they're not necessarily living within the Commodity Exchange Act. Like, this is a field that's sort of built up on a business model that it's a non-compliant model. And it's not ticky-tacky. It's about real protections for investors and for other people that want to access the capital markets. It's about trust in those capital markets.
As you know.
Have I been clear?
Yeah, you're being very clear. As you know, crypto, though, is becoming almost an election issue. There's reports that former President Trump is going to speak at this big Bitcoin conference. He said that he will end, quote, Joe Biden's war on crypto. And there's one more. It's become such a big deal that Mark Cuban has actually said that you, Mr. Gensler, could, quote, literally cost Joe Biden the election. What's your response to this?
I'm going to be easy with you, Annmarie. I don't speak about elections.
You don't have a response to Mr. Cuban?
I don't. Look, my role as a securities regulator, as chair of this great 5,000-person agency that oversees $120 trillion capital markets, we are here to look out for investors, look out for issuers, and where appropriate, to be a cop on the beat. And we have a set of rules that are pretty clear. There's nothing inconsistent about crypto securities and the securities laws. Unfortunately, there's a number of people that are non-compliant with the laws.
Let me ask it a different way. Are you surprised by the political movement we've seen around crypto?
I'm a securities regulator. I'm focused every day on that part of my job, which is protecting the investors, looking out for issuers, access to markets, fair, orderly, and efficient markets. And with all respect, I hope your listeners understand that's my role. Other people can speak about elections.
So the election is coming up, though, and although your term...
Annmarie,
although your term
take three.
Although your term goes beyond November 5th, is there something you want to get done? Do you feel like you're up against the clock to get something done before the presidential election?
Look, it's such a privilege to be in this role. I really mean it. I can't believe I'm serving my third president and been through Senate confirmation 6 times and all this. I just can't believe that. And every day, I think, is a privilege to help the American public. Our clients, 330 million Americans. It's about chasing down insider trading. It's about making sure that there's the proper disclosures. It's about implementing. We still have some significant things. We just implemented this big transition to having the clearance, the settlement cycle to 1 day. But we're also working on the implementation of our Treasury clearing rules. And our $27 trillion Treasury market is way too jittery. It has fragility and jitters in it every couple of years, and settling that down and sort of implementing that set of rules. But yes, there are still some rules that we proposed and we have not yet adopted that we're working on, but we're not doing it against a clock. We are basically trying to promote these markets, enhance these markets on behalf of the American public. And if I'm honored to serve through my term, which is through 26, great. If it's earlier, that's democracy. Democracy in action. And I deeply believe in it, but we're going to do everything we can for the American public.
I guess what you're insinuating there is that if we were to see a Trump 2.0, you likely would potentially be out of a job. Election or not, timelines or not, what is your number one priority at this moment?
It's my number one priority is the American public. That's the client. And so that's who we represent. It's, of course, implementing some of the rules that we've already adopted. It's considering the public feedback on the rules we propose and not adopted, but not against a clock. It's your clock.
Well, it might be yours.
You kind of run the field as well as you can run the field, and when the ref calls the clock, you see where you are. I just with all respect. And of course, it's also being a cop on the beat. You know, half of our agency is examination and enforcement. Another 10 or 15% of our workforce reviews all these disclosure filings and gives feedback to the issuing public. And it's doing that well.